want to thank Woodie Tescher for inviting, as well as Mr. Bornett. And I remember when I was at a summer institute program, when I got to Princeton, he was teaching a calculus class, and I would see you wandering around the hallways thinking about all those calculations in your head. I don't know if he still does that around here. He's just wandering, thinking about that last math problem. But I also want to thank the School of Public Policies here we get a number of our interns from here, and I appreciate the help we've been getting to help think about all the issues going on downtown. My planning director, Mr. Tanner, is Tanner the Planner, as we call him. He teaches here and also is a graduate from the graduate program here. I'm pretty excited about representing downtown LA, and I really, just until 2 years ago, started representing all of downtown Los Angeles. Prior to that, I represented about a quarter of downtown Los Angeles. Every 10 years, the city undergoes a redistricting process, and I advocated to get all of downtown under one council person district, because that would give us an opportunity to think comprehensively and holistically about downtown. And in the last 2 years, we've been very busy, where we think we are pretty much building a city within a city with all the development going on. We have about $12 billion in active investment in downtown LA. That is from the private side. On top of that, we have an underground subway system being constructed, which we just broke ground a couple of days ago. We call it the regional connector, that would really connect all of the rail system that we're building in the county region. And we have some of the most exciting development projects, I think, in all of LA. We are building the largest, or the tallest building west of the Mississippi, the Grand Wilshire Hotel on Figueroa and 7th, where we are building office space, hotel rooms. And we also have one of the last remaining open spaces for downtown LA on the Metropolitan site, as we call it. It is just north of Staples, where we are building a hotel and a number of condo units there as well. And the great thing about this is that with all this investment, and like I said, we're building a city within a city, is that I believe, as many of you do, that any great city needs a great downtown. But if you look at downtown that we have in LA, not too long ago, come 5 o'clock, the light switch would be turned off. It was pretty much only Bunker Hill, where we have our professional services provided, where you had people, where workers come in and do their job, but the light switches went off at 5 o'clock, and downtown LA was pretty desolate. That, as many of you know, has been changing, and it started with LA Live and the Staples Center that was constructed there, and now you see a domino effect happening through the rest of downtown LA, where there's revitalization and new development going on. And as we look at this new revitalization and the new development, you really see not only all sectors looking to come to downtown LA, whether it's new residents who want to live here, new jobs that are being created, and also tourists who are looking to downtown LA unlike before. And the new residents that are coming to live in downtown LA, 10 years ago we had about 10,000 people that lived in downtown. Today we have about 50,000 and growing. We have a number of new residential units being constructed. In terms of jobs and workers, we often underestimate the importance that downtown LA plays for the region. It is really an economic hub, because we have about 500,000 or 500,000 people who drive into downtown each and every day for work. And we often don't see the importance of that in terms of having a livable, friendly place to be when so many people are coming to downtown LA. And on top of that, with tourists, now with LA Live and a number of things we're doing, I think we're going to see a lot more tourists coming to downtown LA. On the residential front, now that I represent a majority of downtown LA, one of the things we've been focusing on, and it's a priority for our office, is to provide those public amenities that you would provide in any other neighborhood. So for the longest time, downtown didn't need public parks, didn't need the lighting streets or safe streets. But now, as more people are beginning to live there, there's a demand on local government to provide those amenities. One of the things we just announced not too long ago was the re-envisioning of Pershing Square. That is the largest park in downtown LA. We put together a task force to ask ourselves, what kind of Pershing Square park would we like to see? How many of you have been there, by the way? Okay, so many of you know it. And we believe, although a great architect was designed it, It doesn't really flow well with the downtown of today. It doesn't really integrate well with the local streets. A lot of concrete, and although my personal view is that we should kind of integrate it more with the local surroundings, not have so many walls between the park and the street. Did you agree or disagree with that noise? I don't know if that... I said that more like a disagreement with what I was saying. Okay, let's get more concrete on Pershing Square Park. How's that? We want to provide more green, more trees, etc. And so we think that this is a great initiative because, after all, Pershing Square can be our town square for the city of LA. So we're working on that initiative. We're also working to provide a new park on 1st and Broadway. That is right next to Grant Park. Grant Park has been a real hit, where we have a lot of greenery and open space. We are looking to provide a new park as well in the Arts District, next to our Clean Tech Incubator. And just to mention or talk a little bit about our Clean Tech Incubator, it's had a lot of success where the Department of Water and Power, along with other departments in the city, we started an incubator to promote or startups in the clean tech industry. It's had a lot of success. You could get free technical advice, free office space. It's been so successful, but unfortunately, a lot of the new businesses do not stay in the city of LA, so we have to do a better job of keeping them in Los Angeles. But not to mention, there's a growing community there, so we're providing a new park next to the Clean Tech Incubator. And on Spring Street, where I think some of the newest historical renovation is happening, we have our Spring Street Park that we just opened up about 2 years ago. So all that to mention is that with all these new residents we see coming in, there's a renewed focus to provide those public amenities that downtown hadn't been providing for a very long time. And I think that's a good thing, because I think for the long-term sustainability of downtown to continue on this growth pattern, we have to provide people to want to live here, to put the demands that we need better public amenities. And one thing we see happening is that young couples come to downtown because they want that urban lifestyle, but once they start growing a family, they start to move. Why? Because we don't have the types of residential units with 2 or 3 bedrooms, and secondly, those public amenities such as elementary schools, parks, and other things like that are not necessarily available. So we're working to change that trend, and hopefully more families begin to stay in downtown LA to continue on that long-term sustainability for downtown's growth in terms of residential needs. The other growth factor is in jobs, and I talked a little bit about the importance of the downtown LA to the region in terms of jobs and growth. And one of my priorities is to continue on a path of supporting economic development and pro-development, pro-growth. It's very easy to have a council member in this position to say, enough is, I don't believe in continuing to grow in this area, it's too crowded already, too much density, and not have that growth support. I believe there's a lot of capacity in downtown LA, not only in terms of new development, but opening up older buildings and that hadn't been used in many years and reopening them up for either jobs or residential or whatever else it may be. But part of that, encouraging that growth, is also to work on the policy side to make sure that the processes we have are as easy as it can be, not as many obstacles. And so we've been doing some things to change some of the policies to ensure that the development process is as smooth as it can be. And finally, on the tourist front, with LA Live and a number of the new attractions that we have in downtown LA, in the past, downtown Los Angeles, as I mentioned, was known mostly for professional services, and then the lights went off. The future of downtown LA is really entertainment. You see more and more people, along with the residents who are moving there, to going to downtown for bars and restaurants and LA Live with all the activity there. And we want to continue to encourage that. But with that comes a need to provide people a place to stay. We did a study that showed us that we are about 5,000 beds short of the necessary space we need to continue to attract more tourists to downtown LA. And when you look at large cities such as LA compared to other large cities, we are about in the bottom third tier in terms of providing a number of hotel spaces we need to attract the tourists we would like to see. We were on this path to expand the convention center that would allow us to attract larger conventions and in turn build more hotels. But 2 weeks ago, or was it last week, we got a surprise announcement that AEG wants to continue moving forward with its plans to build a downtown football stadium. So we extended their entitlements were going to expire this October. They've asked for an extension, so we will discuss that soon. But either way, no matter what we do, whether we extend the convention center for more capacity or build a football stadium, which doesn't exclude the expansion of a convention center, we are about 5,000 beds short. So we have started or implemented a new policy to incentivize the creation of more hotels, which means either some subsidies and breaks from certain tax that are currently given to hotels, or we don't require them to do certain parking requirements or other things like that that we normally would require in the construction of the hotels. Another thing that I've been focusing on to attract more tourism, but it's not the main reason to do it, is to provide better public transportation through a streetcar that we've been working to bring back to the streets of downtown Los Angeles. When I got elected back in 2005, there was a conversation about a streetcar in different parts of downtown LA. Organization that is pro-business called Central City Association was working to create the streetcar. Several nonprofits in the area was interested in creating a streetcar, but I worked with them to bring that conversation into one platform, and that was a platform of an initiative that I'll talk a little bit later called Bringing Back Broadway, that focused on revitalizing the Broadway corridor. But what we did is we started on a path with $10 million to start some initial planning for it. And the reason we want to bring back the streetcar is, number one, to provide a better connectivity between the different neighborhoods in downtown LA. It's an easy, convenient transportation system. Secondly, it provides economic development opportunities. We did an AECOM study that showed us that with the streetcar, we will see an additional $1.6 billion in investment in the downtown area because of the streetcar. And it's similar to what we saw in Portland and Seattle, where there were other modern streetcar systems put in place. In Portland, for example, I asked one of the property owners, well, why is it that their streetcar went into neighborhoods and revitalized them so quickly? He said, well, the property owners are saying that why wouldn't they invest in their property when there was a fixed asset bringing people to my property and taking people from my property? That is one of the most important things we can do. And wherever that streetcar went in Portland and Seattle, you saw revitalization of old neighborhoods that hadn't seen the type of investment that they had now. We envision the same thing happening here in downtown LA. But the other reason I think a lot of people want to see a streetcar is the nostalgia. A lot of us, well, not me, I don't know, but other people remember riding a streetcar. Either them or their parents or their family members would ride the streetcar, and that in itself is a tourist attraction. It brings people to downtown as well. So with that, we're also looking to, like I said, it's not only a great transportation system, but it would also encourage our tourism as well. But no matter what we do in downtown LA today, in continuing this upward mobility and growth and expansion and development, there's one underlying issue that if we don't address it, it will really stop us in our tracks if we don't address this issue. And except for you, I will ask everyone else, what do you think, and you, except for you two, and you, because these people, I know them, I've worked with them. What issue do you think that is, if that's the most pressing issue in downtown LA today? Homelessness, yes. Homelessness, and that's because whether you are a real estate investor that wants to protect your investment, or you are a resident that sometimes you fear for your safety because a lot of the homeless wandering around, a majority of them have mental issues that are not being addressed, or whatever the reason, or you're simply a humanitarian that wants to provide better social services for homeless individuals. What we have today is simply not working. I think the city of LA, along with the county, who provides a majority of the social services, have failed in our approach to addressing homelessness in downtown LA. For decades, we have approached the homeless issue in LA by a policy. It hasn't been an official policy, but we call it the containment policy, where a homeless individual who needs assistance anywhere in the county, simply taken to Skid Row, hopefully contained in that area. That was the thinking. And then it's out of sight, out of mind, it's forgotten, and that was the situation from before. But that is now coming to everyone's attention for two reasons. One is, like I said, without the renewed attention in downtown with either residents or tourists or the developers who want to invest in the area, people are saying, well, you know, there's growth here, but yet we see a lot of homelessness throughout the area. That's one reason. But the second reason it's getting a lot more attention is that Skid Row, quite frankly, is overwhelmed. It's bursting at the seams. It cannot handle the number of individuals now that are bluntly being dumped in the Skid Row area. I got involved more in this issue when, like I said, I started representing downtown LA. I used to represent just about 30% of Skid Row. Now I represent all of Skid Row. And as we were thinking about how to start addressing Skid Row, we looked at the city's responsibility. And the city is responsible for clean streets, safe streets. The county for social service. So when we went out to try to address the issue, we realized that the city in itself was doing a horrible job. The conditions down there are just really bad. And in fact, in 2012, the city was cited by the county for having unsanitary conditions in the area. We allocated about $1 million to go out quarterly to start cleaning the streets. That wasn't enough. In this last year's budget, I was able to acquire $3.7 million to do more intense cleaning and do cleanings every other month. But one thing we did different this time as well is that if our cleaning crews are going to go out there and talk to individuals to move out of the way so we could do the cleaning, I asked the county to come in, social service providers, and as we're touching and talking to people, why not ask them if they need a shelter, if they need drug rehabilitation services, if they need Medi-Cal, whatever it may be. And one of the county workers actually told me that in her 30 years of working for the county in social services, this was the first time that the city and the county had actually worked together in coordinating services to address people's needs on the street. And I was surprised, I was shocked but not shocked. I was shocked because it did take 30 years to get us here, but I wasn't shocked because I don't see any of that coordination in terms of the county and the city providing a holistic approach to the homeless situation in the city of LA. We had huge success. A number of individuals were immediately put into and provided mental services. A number of individuals provided shelter that evening. A number of individuals actually were given drug rehabilitation services. We did it for the first time a month ago, and we're going to go out again this following month, and we expect the same results, and we're going to continue to do this. But this is really not the solution to homelessness. This is addressing a real immediate problem when we have over 3,000 people living on the streets in downtown and Skid Row each and every day. For the long term, in order for the area to address in a better fashion the issue of homelessness, we would have to provide, and this is something that the United Way in our program they call Home for Good, they're proposing this, where we would have to provide permanent supportive housing on a decentralized basis. And what I mean by that is permanent supportive housing is really a term of art in the homeless jargon to say that there is one facility that provides an array of services to an individual and whatever they may need. So for example, if an individual needs shelter and they also need drug rehabilitation, they would not say, well, come sleep here, but go down 5 blocks in Skid Row and get your drug rehabilitation services. They would never make it or never come back. So you provide complete services in one location, but you also do it on a decentralized basis throughout the county so that we don't continue to saturate the Skid Row area. The solution to this, in order to implement this, is really a political question, because the 5 county board of supervisors decide where these permanent supportive housing units go. And many of these supervisors do not want them in their area. But there are models of permanent supportive housing that have shown that they do not disrupt local communities if done right. And also, it's better for the individual looking for the services, because studies have shown that if individuals are kept in their neighborhood that they're familiar with and have a support system and have a network of friends, and it's easier for them to get back on their feet if they know the neighborhood, know a support network in the area, rather than what we do now is take them to Skid Row, dump them in one of the most crime-ridden areas with the most drugs you could find available, and a lot of people actually spiral down instead of really giving them the help they need. So as we move forward, I think we need to continue on the track of permanent supportive housing on a decentralized basis. Continue doing some immediate need to clean up the area more and go to the streets where people are and provide them the social services. But unless we really tackle that issue of homelessness, what we've been seeing in downtown LA today, I think it's going to come to a halt, because it's really an area that the county or the city hasn't provided or done well. What's different from what the city is doing compared to, let's say, New York, which in the last 15 years have done a very good job in addressing homeless in that city, is that in New York, the political jurisdiction or the responsibility or authority, they have both the social service and the public safety and clean street component all in one, and the mayor has a lot more authority in there, so it's very easier for them to direct what is the policy and what we're going to do. And they actually ended up doing a lot more permanent supportive housing on a decentralized level as well, took a lot of it out of Manhattan and started placing that throughout the other 5 boroughs, which I think has worked now. You see a lot less homeless. They're still there, but there's a lot less than what used to exist in New York, and I think the city of LA is way behind the ball in moving in that direction. But one of the things, going back to downtown and speaking holistically about what's happening there, like I mentioned, we need to move forward and get more residents living there in the growth. We have to continue the development that we've seen. There's lots of capacity. And also attracting more tourism to continue the economic vitality of the area. One example that I use about what's possible in other parts of downtown is an initiative I started 7 years ago called Bringing Back Broadway. Now here's another question. How many of you have been to Broadway in downtown LA? So you guys have fairly seen it, right? You live there, all right. 7 years ago, I looked at downtown, and I represented, like I said, a portion of downtown and Broadway. And I think Broadway is one of the most beautiful streets in all of LA. I mean, it's got beautiful architecture, about 12 historic theaters. You can't find so many historic theaters in one corridor anywhere in the country. And it has a lot of potential and a lot of capacity. I mean, most of the floors on the street level, they're filled in, they're being put to use, but most of the upper levels are vacant. There's about 1 million square feet of available space on the upper floors of the buildings on Broadway. And as we embarked on this effort to revitalize this corridor, we realized that we weren't the first to try it. There's been other efforts, but the other efforts, at one time, the property owners were ready, but the local government, the city, wasn't ready to embark on this. And that was, I heard, because at that time, well, actually, when the property owners were ready, they weren't ready was because they were making more on a square foot basis than Beverly Hills rents, because there were so many people just walking the streets, and they were able to capture whatever revenue they needed to capture. But now what we did is both the city and the property owners were ready to do something. It was that the timing was right for Broadway to be revitalized. So we implemented a few policies to help support the revitalization. Number one is we adopted a commercial adaptive reuse ordinance that would make it easier and cheaper for building owners to convert their buildings to adaptively reuse them, specifically the upper floors. And that is because, as of now, if they were to try to do that under the strict state code, it'd be too expensive and take too long for them to do it. So we adopted our own code locally that is not as strict as the state code to open up historic buildings. We also adopted an entertainment overlay zone that will encourage restaurants and bars. For example, they could stay open later. It's easier for them to have signage, etc. And that has attracted more bars and restaurants to Broadway. We also are working to do a sign ordinance for Broadway that would bring back the old blade and neon signs of years past from the 1920s and 30s. And we are also, we allocated about $700,000 in grants to light up the beautiful architecture on the buildings to bring them back to life. I think humans are like bugs. We go wherever there's light, right? So we get attracted to light. We'll get attracted to go back into Broadway. And one of the most exciting things about what we're doing on Broadway is that we implemented a new streetscape plan that is the largest road diet anywhere in the city. We took out 1 lane of traffic. We are extending the sidewalks, putting in trees, street furniture, benches, and this will allow a more pedestrian-friendly street. Our goal here is to make pedestrian use of Broadway just as important as the car use on Broadway. And for the longest time, if you want to get from north downtown Los Angeles to south downtown Los Angeles, Broadway was probably the fastest way, maybe Spring Street somewhat, but that was the fastest way to get down. And every major bus line goes through Broadway as well. We're slowly taking out some of those bus lines to other streets. But what we wanted to do is, yes, slow down traffic. There's going to be growing pains. But I think at the end of the day, when people see our vision of creating a plaza-type environment where you just have thousands of people walking around, sitting down, enjoying something to eat, enjoying a cup of coffee, I think people are going to really like what they see. And we saw a little bit of this for any of you who went through to Ciclavia this weekend, and you just saw tons of people roaming around in places they otherwise wouldn't be. Now, that was easy, yet not easy to do. At some level, it's going to cost a lot of money. What we did right now is put out temporary bollards and temporary items and to see what it can look like. We're going to get some feedback both from the cars and the pedestrians to see how it works, but we're also looking for funding to actually do the whole thing permanently. But a lot of what was difficult about doing this was not so much the financing that we have to find yet, but it was actually changing the culture of the Department of Transportation, because in their minds, they're thinking, how do we move cars through here? Don't take any space in the street because that's for cars. Don't take my parking. Don't take, that was for them, you know, to them, they just want to use it for cars. And so a lot of this was changing the culture at the Department of Transportation about what is possible. It's similar to what we did on York Boulevard in Highland Park. We put in the city's first ever bike corral. That is, in order to take out the clutter of bikes from the sidewalk and also encourage more bicycle use, we took out 2 parking spaces, put some bike racks, and it's so simple, it's called a bike corral. It wasn't the funding that was difficult to do. It wasn't the planning, the design that was difficult. It was the Department of Transportation allowing us to do it. And they're saying, what do you mean you're going to put those bikes there? It's going to be dangerous for the cars. So we eventually got them to see what we wanted to do, and now we have a number of bike corrals going up throughout the city. Same thing with the parklets. We had the city's first ever parklets on Spring Street in downtown LA and York Boulevard, where we took a parking space or 2, put little benches and trees and street furniture for people to gather, and that encourages and supports local businesses, et cetera. The Department of Transportation has now started a program called People Street, that now they understand what they need to do to get the proper permits to do this, and they are encouraging other local neighborhoods to do this as well. But going back to Broadway with our streetscape plan, I think at the end of the day, along with the revitalization that we see there, it's going to bring a lot more people back. We're going to have the upper floors being used again. We're going to have more of the theaters get the type of programming to bring people back. And in our 7 years of this initiative, we've met every milestone, and I think this is one example of what we can do to revitalize other streets throughout downtown and perhaps even the city. So with that, I'll leave it there and take a breather and drink a cup of water wherever I left my water, and and open it up for our questions or comments. Thank you.
First, it's a pleasure to be here. I don't go back to the streetcar, council member, but I go back to those era of downtown. My first job out of school was downtown Los Angeles, and in the 70s. And I was one of those classic guys that at 5 o'clock, actually at 4:59, I'd be in my car to get out of downtown LA. And that's what makes it a sort of an interesting, challenge, at least to have this kind of conversation, in the sense that there's everything that the council member has said here, been involved with, his ongoing initiatives are all on the plus side. You can't find anything. When we moved back our office to downtown LA 2 years ago, the change was dramatic for all of us. A living environment, a place to hang out at night, a place that is much more heading towards sustainability, to use an overused term, et cetera, but a place that's become much more vital as a part of us. It's really becoming that place. Let me ask you first, I'm going to ask a series of questions rather than commenting on specific items that the council member asked, because I think this is obviously, and by his comments, a work in progress. It's a series of steps that are moving downtown forward to be this great place. Vision is truly a downtown and a number of places. Let me ask sort of a question. It's been out there. We've had this influx of housing. We're having these new kinds of uses happening. Some have questioned saying, well, are we going too far? Is there a tipping point beyond which the character of downtown, the functions of downtown are no longer there? We have probably the most immediate in terms of a lot of visibility is the Arts District, an area that is adding housing. One Santa Fe is opening. It historically, I mean, back years ago, a lot of drug dealing in the alleys, et cetera. Artists came in and it has this funky kind of quality, et cetera. And now there are concerns, which is not atypical of arts districts in other communities, but now the concern is how do we begin to protect that sort of seed of a good place, et cetera, with all this change? How do we preserve those qualities that make LA unique and as a series of villages, if you will?
Well, I think, the Arts District, I consider some of the first pioneers for people to come to live downtown. During the 80s, when everybody else was leaving downtown at 5 o'clock, some were coming in to live in the Arts District, which is on the west bank of the Los Angeles River. It's an old industrial area with a lot of industrial warehouses, and they were moving into lofts and making it and calling that home. And I think as we've seen the growth of downtown LA and the expansion of what started, I think, like I said, at Staples, and it's kind of moved on to the rest of downtown LA, I think the Arts District is probably one of the hottest areas right now in terms of real estate. Every single building is being looked upon there as a form of either to reopen them as creative office spaces or build more residential. But one of the tenets we've worked with in our office is to ensure that the character of the Arts District is kept intact. That the artistic feeling when you drive in and you roam around those streets and sometimes alleyways, right, is kept intact, and that we don't lose it. And I've been actually wondering when the local community, because it's a very active community as well, when they will start to fight back on some of these development projects that are sprouting up here and there. I thought they would do it with One Santa Fe, which is, if you tip it on its side, it's probably will be the tallest building on the on the west of the Mississippi. But it actually started with a project nearby there not too long ago, where I think the community said enough is enough, and they got much more involved in not only the density of the project, but its relation to the community. Its architecture, aesthetically, how does it fit into the rest of the buildings? You obviously don't want anything that looks too modern. And you know, to me, I thought to myself, that was really the first time, not the first time, but it started to grow, that people are gonna start fighting back the growth that we've seen there. But they're not saying we don't want any growth. They're saying we like what we see, we wanna continue to grow, but at a slower pace, and one that fits in with the character that's there. So currently, we're working on a new live-work ordinance for the artists, for the Arts District, that will encourage the creation of affordable housing. So if a developer comes and wants to build a new structure or reuse an existing structure, and they're asking for certain entitlements, we will negotiate with them and say, we will do this if you build some affordable units for artists and residents, for example. And we're currently developing that that ordinance, and it's almost like it's not really a set aside, but it's going to encourage more affordable units for artists in the area. So that's kind of from the affordability perspective, and that's what we're doing to hopefully continue on that path to make them affordable. On the aesthetic front, we have a new project that's coming in, and they came in with a modern view, but we told them we'd love to see it more fitting with the rest of the community. They're bringing in old bricks from, I don't know where they're bringing them in. Where they bring them in from, Tanner?
Looking at an old buildings in Cleveland.
So, but you look at the Detroit, yeah. Exactly. So you look at what they're building now, and it's going to be aesthetically, I mean, from the architectural point of view, it's going to be fit in right into the area. And they're building retail, which is something that doesn't really exist in the area as well. And there's a need for more retail. We've been building more residential in the area. And some small coffee shops, a lot of coffee shops, but I think we're meeting the challenge to keep it as it is. I think we've done a good job so far to accommodate that. We just need to build more affordable units in the area.
Let me touch upon that. I walk out the door of my office every day, and there's a new residential construction project almost on every, thankfully, surface parking lot disappearing, which is great. The question, though, as I look at some of the rents there, and this is maybe a much broader issue than just downtown Los Angeles, and you talked about housing affordability. Are there some things that the city can do? Are there ideas about how we sort of not turn this, what's happened in downtown San Francisco? I mean, a lot of people would say that's very positive, but indeed, a lot of people are being priced out, if you will, from living in an environment where the jobs are, et cetera. You need this diversity because you have the jobs and you're going to keep them healthy. You need these diversity. Any ideas about how we can begin to tackle this pretty important issue for all of us?
What we're looking at in downtown is really problematic for all of the city of LA. The reports have come out that LA is becoming, in terms of housing, one of the most unaffordable cities in the country. 10 years ago, we established what's called the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The idea was to fund that, have money available to build additional affordable housing, but there has been no permanent revenue source for it. It's kind of, we created it, but we didn't identify a revenue source for it. So we really haven't done our job, I think, as a city to address the need for more affordable housing throughout the region. But if you take downtown and you see what we're doing in the Arts District, we believe that new live work ordinance for the Arts District, we could then apply it to all of downtown. And although we're a few steps behind in doing that, it'll take a little while to adopt the ordinance, that is our intended goal right now, is to, now when you see a number of new condo units sprouting up throughout downtown, even in the fashion South Park or by LA Live, hopefully they would be encouraged to build more affordable units, because they do want to go up. We're encouraging high rises. The developers around that area are very anxious to give them what we call TFAR. It allows them to go higher than what the local zoning area allows them to do. So if they ask us for TFAR, we're going to ask for additional affordable units to be built. We, in the past, for TFAR, have asked for community benefits, such as give us some money to improve the streets and sidewalks around that area, give some funding to the homeless shelter in the area. But I think as we're looking at the need to make more of a mixed income level for downtown LA, we're looking at them, requiring them now to build more affordable housing at that site. It's very easy right now for developers to say, well, we'll do off-site affordable housing. They do it somewhere else in areas like Bowl Heights, where I live and grow up, or typically have taken a number of affordable housing projects. But in order for us to have that mixed area that we want to see in downtown, we're going to require or ask for on-site affordable units. So to answer your question, we're hoping that this live work ordinance for the Arts District is a model to then eventually expand it out to all of downtown LA. And it is a concern. I mean, you have the affordability units for housing to the two extremes. You have a number of what we call SRO housing units that are for homeless individuals, the cheapest you could find anywhere, and some of the most expensive. But we're not building that core that is not necessarily that is affordable for families, for working people, and that's what we hopefully get to because we want downtown to be available for everyone.
For the 08 recession kicked in, a lot of the new units that were being added downtown had been planned, at least some percentage of them, significant percentage, as ownership units. Mm-hmm. Is ownership a future option downtown? I mean, is that going to be some direction we can move into to give that choice?
Yes, and that's what we want to do. I mean, when you have ownership, you feel more responsibility for the area, and we do want to move in that direction. It was also, we're driven mostly by the economy and what developers would like to produce. They come into my office and into the planning department and say, hey, I have some plans for apartments, or I have some plans for condos for ownership, and we could encourage them, and we essentially negotiate with them to do more condos, more ownership. We think that it helps us establish a more deep-rooted community, and we encourage that, but we do see a number of new condo units coming through.
Good, good.
A majority of the new housing is actually condos.
Good. One of the areas, and as I live and breathe downtown Los Angeles, it seems like a lot of the activity has happened 7th Street, South, the connecting, if you will, LA Live in that area, and filled in to the east, to the southeast, et cetera. Bunker Hill with its shiny high-rise towers. I'll get together with a friend for dinner at a restaurant on 7th, and then we'll walk up to Disney Hall. And the experience of being down on 7th versus walking up to Disney Hall, it's day and night. Yeah. And I mean day and night. It's pretty dead up there at night. I mean, the people who come to Disney Hall come and park in the parking structure, underneath the parking structure, and unless they're going to one of the immediate restaurants, leave. I mean, it's that classical suburban model, in effect, in a core of our community. Thoughts about how that can evolve into be more like, or should it be more like what's south of 7th?
Well, I think you're hitting on two issues there. One is our traditional professional services that made up a majority of what was offered in Bunker Hill, right? And those services, now we have a vacancy rate there of those buildings not being filled up as much as we hoped they would. In fact, the tallest building right now in downtown, I think it's a U.S. Bank Tower, one of the highest vacancy rates, and they're talking to our office about converting some of the upper floors to restaurants and a site area, sightseeing observation deck. And they're thinking, okay, what do we do with this space now that is not being filled and the need's not being filled? At the same time, you have more creative office space being created in some of the historic core in other parts of downtown. So you really don't see a huge demand for the traditional type of professional office space that you had in the past. Those people are thinking about, what do we do with this space? They're thinking creatively. So I see the move for them, and even at one time, the U.S. Bank Tower is being talked about being converted to apartment units. So I see those buildings now being thought about. What else can we do to shift from the traditional professional service office space that we had? And I don't see that demand really increasing for them, because we're having creative office space and other office spaces open up throughout the other downtown. In particular, there's an interest by high-tech industries to now come in, but they don't ask for your cubicles and your roundabout offices that is the traditional way of providing office space right now. And they're looking for something more creative. And so eventually I see more of those Bunker Hill towers converting to other uses, and I think that's a little bit more long-term. When you talk about Grand Avenue and people coming into Disney Hall and Mocha and other places, and people leaving, it's not that creative. Interestingly, I was thinking the same thing. We do have a large development going on the corner of First in Grand called the Grand Avenue Project. And one of the most successful nightclub owners, not that it's going to be a nightclub there, but also hotel developer, Sam Nazarian, is going to operate one of the hotels there. And he has a huge following, younger crowd. And so I think in the future, when that hotel, I forget the name of the hotel that they're building, SLS, I think it's called it SLS, along with a number of, and it's a Geary designed project, by the way, it's going to have great design, along with the new condo units that are being built, you're going to really start mixing the rest of downtown with Grand Avenue with your traditional people who would want to go to Walt Disney for a show or something else and then leave right away. And then across the street, there's going to be all this activity. So I think eventually you're going to see a mix and more activity happening on this side of downtown. Our streetcar currently goes down Broadway, up 7th Street to LA Live, back downhill to come up north, and then it goes down First Street. We do have a spur planned for it. It's in the environmental report to come up First Street and go down Grand to hit that activity. We don't have it funded yet, or it's not in our financing plan, but eventually we might want to fund that with all the new activity that happens up there.
You touched upon, and you asked the audience about the critical elephant in the room issues right now, besides financial, the critical issue of homelessness. And you talked about some very interesting strategies on how to resolve that. I mean, you mentioned that one of the reasons that the if you will, dispersal of these facilities, the care, the service plus the housing facilities, et cetera, has not occurred, as in some cases may have been political opposition. And part of that possibly is attributable to NIMBYism, which affects often political decisions. How do we begin to overcome that, recognizing that we don't want to create just the ghetto, if you will, that has a boundary or a wall around it, Escape from New York, whatever, wherever all those people are imprisoned in an area. How do we begin to get public buy-in and political buy-in at the broader level, recognizing that this is, as you suggested, a big impact upon the downtown?
Well, that's the question that if we had that resolved, we probably would have gone away from, gotten away from the current containment policy. But the fact of the matter is that you have 5 Board of Supervisors with a lot of authority over their jurisdictions that, as any other elected officials, has to respond to their constituency. And it's more of a fear than the reality of what these permanent supportive housing facilities bring to a local neighborhood. But I think it will eventually start to crack the nut if we show the models that are working in other areas, educate the supervisors to say, hey, look, these facilities may not be that bad. It's your own constituents. That we're not going to bring people from other areas to your neighborhood. It's going to be your own constituents in your area that perhaps having a hard time economically, need some support systems. There's people with drug issues in every part of the county. People need rehabilitation services. People need mental services. Every part of the county, not just relegated to one area where we're the source of these people who need social services. And eventually this fear, I think, needs to go away so that we don't have the NIMBYism. It's just a big fear about it's them, when in reality it's all of us. And it's just when those them happen in our neighborhood, we put them out to Skid Row. And so it's a real educational effort that needs to happen with our supervisors. Now, we have an opportunity, I believe, because we have two new supervisors coming in November and December, actually, whoever wins the election for Zev Yaroslavsky's seat, and Hilda Solis now on supervisor seat 1. And I think this gives an opportunity for all of us, the city of LA, and including the 80 other cities that are faced with the same issue. I mean, in terms of educating them that we all could benefit in going this path that New York went, which is permanent supportive housing on a regionalized basis. But a lot of it is fear, it's NIMBYism. The supervisors have a lot of power and control over what happens. They're like their own mayors in their own jurisdiction. And so it's a matter of educating them and showing that it's not as bad of an issue. If we go this direction, it'll eventually help everyone.
I'm going to ask one last question and then opportunity for the students to spend a couple of minutes before we close to their questions. My last question, and I had it asked this before, but I thought about this because I don't know how to answer this either. Is there something that's truly missing downtown? You talk about all the pieces. We've added some grocery stores, we've added entertainment and nightlife, we've added housing, all those pieces that I said when I was here in the 70s, those weren't here, those elements weren't here. And we're beginning to crack that barrier of getting some more green, some more of that, making things that make community livable. Is there one, and we talked about the issue of homelessness, is there something else that seems to be, you know, another in the puzzle of downtown? Is there something that also needs to be there that we haven't talked about yet?
I think we need to attract families, and it's something I mentioned earlier. And you attract families by getting the right the residential units that have 2-3 bedrooms, and when residential developers come to my office, we ask for some of those where they could be constructed. You need more schools. We have a new Metro charter school that provides elementary level, but then middle school, where do these kids go? Where would they want to go? And high school is not much of an issue. You could find reasonably decent high school around. So it's really providing more schools, more multi-unit residential units. But I think it's also looking at how for the long term, the job base. If we're not going to have the traditional professional services, there's a huge interest by the high-tech industry in looking at downtown LA. Initially, they were telling us, we love the area, we want to go there. We're reading about it in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, and GQ magazine even wrote about downtown LA. Interestingly, the LA Times hasn't covered comprehensively what downtown LA is happening. I mean, they cover project by project, but they haven't covered what this really means, that we're building a city within a city, and in their own backyard, they haven't. All these other national publications I've covered, they see it, they get it, but I guess you have to be away to really see what's happening. You know, how do we, the high-tech industry then said, you know, you really don't have the wiring necessary for their old buildings. We like the layout. And now with a lot of things going wireless, and you can have your hub of what you need to be wireless separate from the building, they're more interested now. And so on our end, to continue to have that job base, I think the high-tech industry and bringing that influx of young people and the excitement and vitality of that, and the lifestyle that may bring to get more people on the street, a bit more environmentally conscious, to want to ride public transportation, ride bicycles. If LA does a job and really hook in the high-tech industry, and we're talking to a few huge tech firms right now, I think that's going to be another shot in the arm for downtown LA. If you look at the Ace Hotel, for example, and what that did to Broadway, that was a very important shot in the arm because it brought in a type of demographic of people who want to walk the streets, want that urban lifestyle, are looking for things to do. And I think downtown needs that right now to continue on this trajectory to be alive. And you want a downtown that you feel alive, and with a lot of things happening. So the high-tech industry, I think, that job base that we need, if we attract that, it's going to be a huge boom. And that is just to continue on the economic job growth area. Otherwise, I don't really see much job growth continue to occur, and then more families staying. I think those are the two real necessities right now for downtown LA.
Sitting here at Price School and also practicing planner downtown, and I'm curious for more input from you and from Woody, frankly, about public sector investment. You talk a lot about private sector role, the billions of dollars we're putting in, the real estate conversions, the new development going in, and the excitement and the attractiveness that downtown's seen. There's a couple areas I'd like to touch on, but focusing on what additional leveraging the public sector can do. I like what's happening on Broadway, the streetscape, and the investment that's going on there. I'd love to hear more about Pershing Square. I was excited about the announcement recently. I'm following the Renew accounts on social media. Excited to see what you guys come up with there. As I think that's a key public asset in terms of the apex of downtown, bordering on all these districts, surrounded by development. It's a great convening opportunity to create that sense of place for families as well as residents and business folk. And then just in general, you mentioned schools and these other opportunities that could come from an additional presence and collaboration from the public sector, providing some of those feeder assets that could help spur on additional private sector growth. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, on the public side, we really have no money. It's no secret. And if you look at the public infrastructure throughout the city, it shows. You know, we put no money in the budget to fix our broken sidewalks. Our streets are probably C- when they're graded as a whole, and we don't have a permanent revenue source to provide for the public infrastructure needs of the city as a whole. But I think downtown LA is in a very unique situation where you have so much private investment coming in, we could leverage that for public improvements. And that's the way we're funding a lot of the public improvements in downtown LA. So for example, Pershing Square, there was a development across the street by Mark Farling Partners, who in our discussion with them, they were interested in saying, well, we want to help the city. This is going to be a great investment for us. They're building, I forgot how many units. And we were just talking about Pershing Square that is across the street and the need to upgrade those facilities. And they said, well, we'll contribute $1 million to get this effort off the ground, right? So we're leveraging all the private investment going on for public purposes. The streetcar is a great example. We have about $60 million in construction dollars where the property owners within a 3-block radius tax themselves to provide for the $60 million. Every condo unit will pay on average $30 more a year, but with the values going up because of the streetcar, it's a wash and it's actually beneficial. And that's $60 million. We also have, we're going to apply for some federal funding to get to the $250 million cost. But but we will still need some additional financing, and we're looking to do a public-private partnership where an engineering company comes in, helps us fill in that gap in financing, and then either construct it or even help us operate the streetcar. So what I see happening downtown right now is really a combination of the public sector leveraging the private sector interest in downtown LA. Pershing Square, even on the Broadway, for example, you know how much it costs to fix those streets? It's like each block is so expensive. When I got the price tag on each one, it's just so expensive. But as we get more of these new projects going up, and we ask for TFAR to go up higher, and we ask for community benefits, we're funding public infrastructure projects like that. I think overall, the city and its ability to finance its public infrastructure projects, the options about where they get that funding is very limited. Our bonding capacity has shrunk as we've bonded a lot of our projects, and these are individual projects where they're building bridges or dams and lakes or whatever it is. That's becoming smaller and smaller. That's our bonding capacity from New York and them looking at our assets. Can we do a bond that we've done, for example, to build all the new schools that we built? We built about 100 new schools in the last 8 years in the school district, and there were 3 of them from the school district, 1 from the community colleges, to build more facilities that are in each property owner's property tax. I think at some point we're going to start asking how much more of this can we do to go that well. And so the well for the public sector to go to get money for public financing of its infrastructure is very limited. But like I said, for downtown, a very unique situation where there's a lot of private investment, and so you leverage those dollars into improving the public infrastructure down there.
Another question, back in the back.
Hi, my name is Felice Carson. I'm actually not a student. I moved here in the last few weeks from New York, so of course I'm looking to recreate everything I had there in Manhattan, including my bike share, 24-hour shopping, including, all my services. But I love downtown. I'm using a workspace there. I just went to, I guess it was Clean Tech. I walked by a Clean Tech Global Showcase, which is wonderful. And I have a few comments and then a question. One is, fear not about the bike lane. Everybody bitterly protested in New York, and it's taken only about a year, and I've heard, it's really settled down a lot. So there are many rides, bike share is great. So my question again pertains to homelessness. This is one thing I've really noticed. You seem to have some great parks. My workspace is by Pershing Square. I took the subway here, which was great for the first time today. But what people have told me was that other states and cities are shipping homeless people here with a one-way bus ticket. So it almost seems like the better your services are, the more the word will spread, and the more people that will come here. So how can you address that in a humane way that honors people living here who don't want to deal with that, but also, you know, takes into consideration that you can't ID everybody, most of them don't have home residences, so in terms of returning them to their constituency, I don't know how you do that. So how do you plan on addressing?
Yeah, well, number one, on the, as a New Yorker, I hadn't been to New York in 15 years, and I was there 2 years ago, and in Manhattan in particular, I was amazed as to every public space, there was some use now, and they made little plazas, and yeah, and we were hoping to do that here in LA, and we're doing that with our parklets and our bike corrals and other things. Our bikes, I'm one of the hugest, whatever you want to say, advocates of bike lanes in the city. And we have a master plan for bike use, bike lanes, to put out more bike lanes in the city. But unlike New York and Chicago, or two other large cities in the country, our local council members have a lot of authority as to what happens in their district. You know, New York has 40 council members. Chicago has 50 aldermen, elder persons, and here, if a council member doesn't want to follow the master plan, they could kaboosh bike lanes. But I've been very supportive of bike lanes in my district. In fact, there's some places where we had the fear of bike lanes, and I think at the end of the day, we built them. Nothing really horrible happened. It's even better for the street. But on the homeless question, dumping is a big issue for Skid Row. As I mentioned earlier, we've had a policy of containment, and not only where the county, the region has said, let's go take our homeless individuals and put them in Skid Row and forget about them. You have hospitals doing that. You have police departments from other cities doing that. Maybe 4 months ago, there was a Southgate police car that from the city of Southgate that came by, and people watched them open the back door, and somebody got out and they left them there. And that has been occurring for a long time. Our city attorney is very active in going after the hospitals who continue to do this. When they give people a one-way ticket from other states, other cities, I mean, we can't really control that, but I think if we do what we have to do to decentralize services from Skid Row, and not make it as a place that's known for that dumping, we won't have the dumping problem. So I don't think we're going to stop dumping until we take care of making Skid Row less of an area where all the services are provided. We have to slowly peel away those services there so that they're not one area where people just go dump people. And that's really what we have to do, instead of like going after hospitals all the time, going after other states and telling them not to do it. We really have to take care of the problem here so that people don't feel comfortable doing it. And we're heading in that direction, I think, with a political solution, hopefully, and more funding for permanent supportive housing.
Hi, second Carl, thank you for coming to speak today. Mine's a little bit more of a localized question. I and a couple of other people here today are in Don Spivak's Economic Development Studio, and we're working on the Fashion District. And one of our question marks at the moment of what we're trying to grapple with is the Flower District potentially moving, or I guess the two big distributors in the Flower District. And you know, with what we've been talking about with the homelessness and the expansion of Skid Row, are you doing anything or concerned about the Flower District, hoping that those big distributors stay, or the possible effects they could have if they did actually move and the Flower District is not what it is today anymore?
Yes, well, the Flower District, I think, is facing what most of downtown is facing. One is the Skid Row issue flowing into the Flower District even more so than it already has. It's been like that for a very long time, but you see a lot more homeless individuals in the areas. People don't feel safe to shop. The area is not kept up as much as it should be. But you also see, even within the owners of the flower businesses, when they look around downtown and say, hey, I could make a lot more money if I build some condo units here, some apartments. I've seen a couple of proposals in the past by some of the property owners that currently house the some flower shops looking to do that. It is of concern. I've been talking to one of the two big ones. I don't even know them by name. I just know them by the individuals who are there. And we're looking to find ways that they've asked me, look, if we work more on the homeless issue, we're not going to be so hard pressed to convert our property into apartments or condos. So if you could work with us to do the immediate thing that we have to do. You know, we have the long-term plan for homelessness, but the immediate thing, which is just cleaner streets, safer streets, more lighting, basic things, we will keep them there. That's all they're asking for, and not so much for them, but for their customers. The customers who go shop, and they go early morning, very early, 3, 4 in the morning to do their shopping. So they say, we just need basic things around here like lighting. And you know, downtown, as any other neighborhood, has gone through its evolution where for a while those industries could exist there, and you had Skid Row, but it wasn't as bad of a problem. It's gone so out of hand now that people don't want to stay there anymore, or they could live with not having lighting because it wasn't as unsafe as it has become now. And quite frankly, the city's response for the last 6 years has been put more police. We did the 50 Safer Streets initiative, which put out 50 more police officers in the Skid Row area. And so the city's only response at the time was to deal with homelessness from a law enforcement perspective, which I could understand to some degree because, in fact, Skid Row is the heroin capital of their area. I mean, that's where most of the heroin is sold for the area. You have a lot of individuals who go to Skid Row not because they're homeless, but because that's where they deal their drugs. That's where they've very little eyes and ears on them. So for a while, the city's only response was not the cleaning that I talked about in terms of Operation Healthy Streets and getting more social services on the street, but was you had officers dealing with mental people who had mental issues. You had officers dealing with someone who just needed housing. You had a lot more city government personnel on the street, but it wasn't the right type of approach. I'm glad we're getting away from that. I think it helped a little bit just to deal with the criminal element, but you mixed up people who really need the service with the criminals, and it wasn't right. We were arresting a number of homeless individuals rather than putting them in services they need. So to some extent, and I raise that to say that it had gone out in hand that we started putting more officers out there, but really what you need is basic things like lighting, more cleanliness, and some law enforcement, not to the extent that we have in the past. I'll end with this. One thing that I have proposed on the homelessness issue is to have a homeless czar for the city. I don't know if czar is the right word, but we do need a coordinator or someone to even talk about what our policy is on homelessness, because right now it's disjointed, and our only real discussions that we have in city council about homeless issues is our updates on litigation. I mean, the city gets sued on a number of issues dealing with homelessness, whether people's possessions should be kept by the police, how often they could keep them. So we have a reactive litigation approach that is setting the policy for the city rather than being proactive. And that individual, if it's a coordinator or czar, whatever you call it, could work with the different departments in the city and say, hey, this is our proactive policy in dealing with homeless issues. And I believe it should be done by ordinance. What that means is that there's somebody going to be there all the time thinking about this. Right now it's done at a political level, like Villaraigosa, his approach was, say, the safer, the safer streets with the 50 officers. Right now I'm working on this out of my political office, but it shouldn't be depend on who's in office. It should be someone who's constantly, every day, every month, every year, thinking about how is the city approaching the homeless issue. On top of that, since the county provides most of the social services, that person could coordinate with the county. And there's also a group called LASA who is responsible for managing this, but they only do what's been told to them by the county and the city. We're not telling them any real policy direction. We just give them funding to provide services. And they're also not only deal with the city, but they deal with 80 other cities. And so we just have a real convoluted approach right now as a city that if we get a coordinator that's doing this each and every day, I think that's just a start in us moving forward. Not only that, I don't have the staff or the capacity in my office to really approach one of the biggest problems that the city is facing. I think right now for the city that is the lowest crime levels that we haven't seen since the 1950s, that we are an economic upturn, that we do have investment, job growth, et cetera. Two of the most critical things I see the city facing is the affordability of housing and homelessness. And we are not doing a good job on either of those, but that's what I think the city should be focusing on. And on top of that, I think there comes that rare occasion for any city to ask itself what it wants to be for the future. And I think the city of LA is in that point right now. We have a new mayor. We have people thinking creatively, innovatively about what our neighborhoods should be, what type of city we'd like to be, and people are asking those questions. And I think that window of opportunity comes once in a life, well, not once in a lifetime, rarely does it come, but it comes once in a long while. And I think the city of LA is at that point right now. Where does it want to go from here? And whatever decisions we make now are going to impact us 5, 10 years from now. So right now is a really critical time, I think, for the city of LA.